when I tell people I lived in the Democratic Republic of Congo for the last 10 years, I usually get a look of surprise that's based on the perception of Congo, informed by the vast array of doomsday articles in the media. Congo is home to the conflict that is the most deadliest since World War II, has one of the highest poverty rates, one of the lowest life expectancy rates, has one of the largest UN peacekeeping operations in the world, and Goma, the city that I lived in for nearly a decade, was overtaken by a rebel group just a few years ago when I lived there. Yet despite this confined definition of Congo in the media, a challenge that many other emerging countries also face in the media, today we're going to talk about success and opportunity in emerging markets, and we're going to talk about how we can reduce poverty and catalyze economic development for those who need it most through partnerships between businesses and NGOs. So when I first moved to Congo, I worked for an excellent hospital founded by a Congolese orthopedic surgeon. This was a grassroots organization with leadership on the ground floor. The medical team had seen more than most hospitals could ever imagine. 2 decades of conflict, a volcanic explosion that actually wiped out half of the city. And it was here that I learned that the last thing that I could do, or should even try to do, is to swoop in as an outsider with my own solution. And I was humbled quite quickly. When I was first learning to speak Swahili, I got very excited and proud, and so I decided it was the time to break it out into a meeting. So I did, and just drop the mic. I speak Swahili now. Turns out, the phrases "I understand" and "I am drunk" only differ by a letter. So there I was throughout the entire meeting, insisting the fact that I was inebriated. And that's where I started, with a lot to learn. And I can say the first 3 years I spent in Congo, all I did was learn. It's a country geographically the size of Western Europe, home to 70 million people. It has some of the world's largest natural mineral reserves and could feed and power all of sub-Saharan Africa. Yet despite this unbound economic potential, Congo is second to last on the Human Development Index. It's received $26 billion in development aid over the past decade. So naturally, I started asking myself and others about the effectiveness of development aid. And here we're not talking about humanitarian aid, which is much needed disaster relief, immediate crises relief, but development aid, the type of aid that is supposed to decrease poverty and catalyze economic opportunity. And what I learned, I want to boil down to sustainability. And in the context of an NGO or a nonprofit working in development aid, sustainability means working yourself out of a business. As an NGO, you should be working yourself out of a business in development aid. You should be approaching a social issue with a business model, because the goal of development aid is to address the core of an issue. The why does this community not have economic opportunity? And at the end of the day, the solution should be that whether it's 5, 10, or 15 years from now, that you are no longer needed. So let me give you an example. I'm a huge coffee drinker, can't deal without it. So despite growing some of the world's best Arabica coffee beans in Congo, I couldn't find good Congolese coffee in Congo, and I couldn't find it on the international specialty market. So we got to thinking, what would it take to get this Congolese coffee bean into your cup here in America? And in the process, can we increase the income of Congolese farmers? So we went to talk to farmers about revitalizing the market, and they all had lucid memories of their parents and their grandparents being able to renovate their houses, pay for health and education due to the cash flow from coffee. They pointed to farmers in Brazil and Colombia and said, we want to make money from coffee like those farmers. So we went to a potential donor and said, you know what, we think we can help revitalize this market and then work ourselves out of a job. They took the risk and gave us the funds. We went back to the farmer businesses and said, all right, we can help you revitalize this industry. We're going to invest in improving the quality of coffee. We're going to invest in the infrastructure and the processing. We're going to invest in planting new trees, ensure your food crops are also thriving, and make a business plan that ensures that we can attract premium buyers. But we knew that we as an NGO could not do it on our own. So we engaged the private sector from the very beginning. We went to an international coffee trading company and said, listen, we will help you enter the Congolese market if you can guarantee us that you will help to sell this quality coffee at a premium price. And they agreed. We went to US coffee roasters and said, the potential of this coffee is amazing. We just need you to commit to purchasing the first lots of coffee that may not be up to your quality standard right away, but we guarantee in the second year we'll surpass your standards. And they agreed. We went to an investment fund and we said, we need you to make these high-risk loans to farmers at low interest rates, but we will mitigate all the risk on the ground for you and ensure that you get your money back with a return. They agreed. Then we went to the Congolese government and said, listen, your export tax on coffee is far too high. It's up to 13%, when other countries in the region are 1% to 3%. And you're actually losing tax revenue because your coffee is going fraudulently across the border. And this week, they are working on revising that tax code. And at the end of the day, farmers tripled their income from coffee, had a 100% loan repayment rate, and in the first quarter of next year, you'll be able to find Congolese coffee in 1,200 coffee shops across America. And we'll be able to slowly work ourselves out of a job. Thank you. And while we started working on coffee, another problem we kind of encountered was recruiting the right types of folks to work with us to help build the capacity of these coffee businesses. We couldn't find enough candidates that had the agribusiness background, bringing in the agronomy and the business experience. 70% of Congolese gain their primary source of income from farming. Agriculture is the future of the country, yet we just could not find candidates with an agribusiness background. So as opposed to look outside of the country, we said we're going to invest in universities to help them turn out graduates that meet the market need. So we worked with one of our university partners to develop an agribusiness program that now not only we are recruiting candidates from there, but other business and NGOs are also recruiting recent graduates from the school. Another problem we encountered with coffee is health. Women play a huge role in coffee production. Yet Congo has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. Every hour of every single day, 4 women in Congo die because of complications in pregnancy and labor. Despite the mere tragedy of that, imagine the economic impact that it has on families. So we then worked with one of the coffee businesses to say, we're going to help you develop a maternal and child health insurance model to ensure that women can go safely deliver at a health center and that giving birth doesn't have to be a question of life and death. It's this type of kinetic problem solving that should be emblematic of NGOs. We should expect that we may not know what the next problem is going to be. Yet too often, NGOs get mired down in bureaucracy, they do not innovate, and they do not admit to challenges or failures out of fear of the donor pulling funding. But as NGOs, we should be innovating, and we should be failing, and we should be learning from those failures to come up with solutions to some of the most pressing problems of our time. But if I as an NGO do not understand or practice market-based principles, then how can I expect to catalyze economic opportunity in some of the most immensely difficult emerging market situations? There's been a lot of recent positive energy lately about the World Bank report that just came out, stating that we've reduced global poverty by 200% over the last 25 years, which is great. But 71% of the world's population lives with less than $10 a day, and 31% of the world's population lives with less than $3 a day. So if we were representative of the world here in this room, 7 of 10 of us would be living on less than $10 a day, and 1 in 3 of us would be living with less than $3 a day. So clearly, the creation of income, of wealth, is central to resolving the fact that 1 in 3 of us live with less than $3 a day. Yet too often, businesses and NGOs don't collaborate. But imagine if businesses increasingly saw NGOs as innovators working in high-risk markets. And imagine if NGOs saw businesses as the key to sustainability. Businesses should be able to heavily rely on and support NGOs to improve their social and environmental responsibility strategies. And NGOs should stop chasing the dollar, but instead ask ourselves, what are our core competencies? And then market those services to businesses who need them to improve their sustainability strategies. I have a good friend who works in the high fashion industry, and she received an email the other week asking her to make sure that there is no ISIS cotton in their supply chain. You see, ISIS took over the majority of Syrian cotton production, which finds its way into Turkish mills. And Turkey is a number 2 supplier of fabric to Europe. But she stared at the email, a bit surprised that her colleague thought she could just figure this out in the afternoon. You see, cotton goes from the field to another facility for spinning, to another facility for ginning, to another facility for weaving, to another facility for fabric production, and to another facility for garment production. And by then you could have an ISIS thread with a Vietnamese thread. She called me up and said, "This is precisely the type of service I would pay an NGO to do. I am desperately looking for traceability of my product." You see, because when you have traceability, then you can start talking about sustainability. Let's go back to the coffee example. By just putting this coffee bean in your cup, have I done my job? I haven't if I haven't given you the traceability of that product. Because traceability helps us transfer basic human values into corporate values down the supply chain. When I know the conditions in which a product is being made, then I can begin to address the social and environmental issues that surround that production. I have a good friend who 21 years ago was deciding whether or not to pick up a gun to fight to defend his family in what was one of the largest mass killings in our present-day history. Today he works and has dedicated his life to developing economic opportunity for those who need it most across the world. He came over to Congo to visit some of our work, and we took him to a vocational training center where we were giving young adults the opportunity to earn a dignified income by learning a new trade. A lot of these kids had been former child soldiers, teenage mothers, and most had limited to no education. So he stood in the corner talking to some of the young men at the auto mechanics workshop, many of whom I had known before, and I had known that they were former child soldiers. The next day, as he was getting ready to leave, we gave him a picture with the young men in the auto mechanics workshop, their arms around him, smiling. And he pulled me aside and he said, "You know, do you understand that these are precisely the types of kids that I would have been wanting to fight against 20 years ago? The kids who joined rebel groups because they had no other viable economic opportunity, they had no economic security, they had no education, and they had very few other options apart from resorting to violence. But together we can change that." And now today, the company that he works for and the NGO that I work for are not only creating new opportunities for these kids, we're also opening up new markets for those who are currently just living on a few dollars a day. But we could not have done it without each other. Thank you.